whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Aki nei, a cop killer, admits the dying police officer he shot asked for his help, but he just walked away. It's a tale of two cities. An Auckland pharmacy is giving hundreds of COVID jabs a week, but in Wellington, pharmacies say they're way off the pointy end of the rollout. A drive-by shooting in South Auckland has a neighbourhood on edge. The budget Christchurch stadium that could cost the city in other ways. Sydney is setting the kind of records you don't get a medal for. Why are COVID cases still climbing? The perfect storm that could deliver some swell waves for the first ever surfing Olympics, and the UK's newest Jurassic Park, a mystery dinosaur dig.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with tēnei. A jury has been told Eli Epiha was intent on killing police officers last June, so chose the most efficient of two weapons and acted without empathy. In the High Court in Auckland, Epiha admits murdering Officer Matthew Hunt and dangerous driving causing injury, but denies the attempted murder of another officer, David Goldfinch. He shot at the officers after fleeing a routine traffic stop and crashing. In a closing address, Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey told the jury Epiha could have helped the wounded officers.
He calmly saunters off to arrange his ride to get out of there. No attention spent upon Constable Hunt. None. He tried to say he thought about putting him in the car to take him to the hospital. Well, it's just inconceivable, self-serving.
Brian Dickey says the facts are cold and stark. An occupant of the house targeted in a drive-by shooting in the Auckland suburb of Clendon says he's lucky to be alive. The shooting happened on Palmers Road about 4:20 this morning. Tuporo Maroroa lives in the house with his father, brother and younger sister.
Right where the window was where my bed is. Yeah, so it was close. But yeah, just lucky nobody got hurt, eh?
Mr. Maroroa believes his house was shot at 6 times. He says the family rushed to the rear of the property to avoid being hit. A police spokesperson says the investigation will look at any possible gang links. You can hear more on this story in Checkpoint shortly. The fate of the Trans-Tasman bubble is in question, with Cabinet Ministers calling a special virtual meeting this afternoon to discuss the border arrangement. New Zealanders, though, will have to wait till at least tomorrow to learn the outcome. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
A Thursday Cabinet meeting is unusual, particularly in a recess week when Parliament shuts up shop. Ministers have had to beam in from around the country to discuss Australia's plight, with half its population in lockdown. The Prime Minister's office says the meeting had been planned for several days. Any announcement won't come until tomorrow, but RNZ understands a total pause is on the table. Quarantine-free travel is already paused from New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia.
Christchurch councillors have voted to reduce the capacity of its new stadium in a bid to stop ballooning costs. The initial plan was for the indoor stadium to have 30,000 seats, but councillors voted this afternoon to reduce it to 25,000 to avoid an $88 million budget blowout. Mayor Leanne Dalzell says reducing the capacity is the right thing to do.
It is not about the capacity, it is about the experience. And therefore, I'm saying that this is our sweet spot. The exponential increase in cost for seats that we might fill once a year is simply irresponsible.
The budget for the stadium is $473 million. The flood-battered Bulla District communities will receive more government funding to assist them as they recover. Acting Emergency Management Minister Chris Farfoy announced the further $1 million contribution today. He says the funding will be available for immediate use. The government previously contributed $300,000 towards the Bulla Mayoral Relief Fund. 3 people are seriously injured after a crash in the Karangahake Gorge between Waihi and Wairoa in Waikato. State Highway 2 is closed after the 2-vehicle collision that occurred just after 3 o'clock this afternoon. The road will be closed for some time and diversions are in place. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 5. The Ollie Whites kick off their Olympic campaign tonight, with the men's under-24 football side hoping to make the most of a favourable draw, while the football ferns may have drawn the pool wall of death, the men's team is eyeing the opportunity to advance to the knockout phase for the first time. The Football Ferns lost 2-1 to Australia this morning, and next play world champions USA, who suffered a surprise 3-0 loss to Rio silver medalists Sweden. The Ollie Whites failed to emerge from pool play in Beijing in 2008 and London in 2012, but with South Korea, Honduras and Romania in their group, it could be third time lucky, though coach Danny Hay has a warning.
Really positive results against Argentina, and watched them against France the other day. They played them off the park. So I guess there's potentially a little bit of a lack of understanding of just the quality that we're coming up against in terms of a side like that.
Meanwhile, Olympic organisers have revealed 2 athletes in the Olympic Village have tested positive for COVID-19, bringing the total number of cases related to the Games to 87. The New Zealand squash player Paul Cole has lost his World Championship semi-final in Chicago, going down 3-1 to Egyptian former world number 1 Mohammed Al Shorbagy. 2-time major champion Lydia Ko will tee off in an hour and a half alongside world number 1 Nelly Korda in the opening round of the 4th women's golf major of the year, the Evian Championship in France. Ko is chasing her first major win in 5 years. That's the news.
Deadly floods sweep central China.
It's almost like something out of a horror film.
Celebrations of Kiribati Language Week.
This is home. We treat it as our meeting house, which we call the Manebe.
And is the vaccine rollout to Group 4 too hasty?
We might end up swamping out a group that deserves to be prioritised.
Priorities. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taumaranui and Taupo. Fine spells, isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine tonight, a few showers tomorrow, clearing from Hawke's Bay in the afternoon. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa. A few showers clearing from the south tomorrow morning and afternoon. Nelson and Northern Marlborough, scattered showers clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. For the remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, rain clearing south of Christchurch by the evening, elsewhere overnight, fine tomorrow. Bulla, showers clearing tonight, fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers in the north. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from isolated showers in Fiordland. Otago and Southland, a few showers for Southland and Clutha tonight. Fine tomorrow, apart from the odd shower about Stewart Island. And Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tonight, then clearing tomorrow morning. RNZ National. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā e ho. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. Welcome to Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Cabinet ministers are meeting right now to decide the fate of the Trans-Tasman bubble. The meeting's been called just hours after New South Wales recorded 124 new COVID-19 cases, a record high in the state. Our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch, joins me now from our Parliament studio. Kia ora, Craig, what's going on?
A very unusual set of events here. Ministers beaming in from all over the country, breaking into their recess week, what's usually a Parliament's break. A lot of them are supposed to be on leave, on holiday at the moment, including the Prime Minister. Those plans have been abruptly shelved for this special meeting to discuss the Trans-Tasman bubble. Now, I have been told that this meeting has been in the works for several days, and it's just that just now is when we're finding out about it. But it speaks to that dire situation, the urgency that Australia finds itself in, the speed at which the crisis is developing. New South Wales in particular really struggling, Australia really struggling to contain the spread of that Delta variant there. Now, I have been told that a whole range of options are being discussed by the Cabinet. Basically, the full gamut, everything on the spectrum, including right up to a full pause of the whole arrangement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is what they will go for, or even that that is the most likely outcome, but it is an option that is being considered. That New South Wales state will be causing ministers a lot of concern.
So when are we expected to hear what their decision is?
No announcement until tomorrow at the earliest, if at all. Basically, if there is a decision, we will find out about it tomorrow. Do not wait up tonight to see if you can find out. Ministers do have a lot to consider. We actually asked Chris Hipkins about this yesterday during the regular Wednesday 1 p.m. COVID-19 update. We put to him, what is the point of the travel bubble at this point, with 3 states closed. Is it time to pull the pin effectively? He would not be drawn on that, only saying that the full arrangement, everything at the border remains under constant review, and that the government is ready and can move quickly. Remember, quarantine-free travel is currently paused in 3 states. That's New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. Hopefully tomorrow we will find out if that is to go any further.
Thanks, Craig. That is Craig McCulloch, our Deputy Political Editor, joining us there live from our Parliament office. Tonight, the cop killer who walked away from a dying police constable who asked for his help. Eli Epihar has been described as fully engaged and intent on killing officers when he shot one dead in an Auckland suburb last year. The 25-year-old admits killing Constable Matthew Hunt on a street in Massey, but denies the attempted murder of Constable David Goldfinch. The Crown says he always planned to open fire on police, while Epihar says he was on a mission to protect his family. Katie Todd reports from the High Court in Auckland.
It's this audio from Raynella Drive in June last year that the Crown says clearly shows Eli Epihar was intent on killing. Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey says it's a clear woohoo. He says it's from Epihar. Mr Dickey told the jury it's the sound of someone fully engaged and intent on killing police officers. He says Epihar picked up the more efficient of 2 loaded guns in his car as Officer David Goldfinch approached.
Hard as that is to understand, for whatever reason, best known only to Mr Epihar, and one which he didn't share with us as evidence. But he was always going to open fire. Now, we can say that with 100% confidence because he did open fire.
In the witness box today, Eli Epihar denied he was shooting to kill. He admits murdering Matthew Hunt, but says the 4 shots which hit Officer David Goldfinch were merely coincidental, intended to scare him away. He didn't know they'd struck the officer. He told the court life isn't, quote, a PlayStation game. Under cross-examination today, the only reason Epihar gave for killing Mr Hunt was that he got a fright.
He asked me for help and I thought about it. I was thinking about it for a few seconds. When I was looking at him, that's when I started to hear sirens. And I was thinking about chucking him in the police car and driving him down to Waitakere Hospital. But I didn't, because when I was hearing those sirens, I just thought about the Home Defenders Squad was on the way.
In the Crown closing, Brian Dickey told the jury someone who wasn't intending to kill a police officer would have shown empathy and stopped to help.
He calmly saunters off to arrange his ride to get out of there. No attention spent upon Constable Hunt. None. He tried to say he thought about putting him in the car to take him to the hospital. Well, it's just inconceivable, self-serving.
Epihar's lawyer Mark Edgar told the jury Epihar certainly didn't get out of bed intending to hurt police officers. He says Epihar was on his way to brandish the firearms at gang members to protect his family. Mr Edgar said it would be easy to empathise with Mr Goldfinch, who believed he was running for his life, when there's no evidence Epihar chased Mr Goldfinch across the road.
And that he might believe in that scenario that his life was under threat, running down the street, feeling the bullets, seeing the divots explode around him. That was powerful rhetoric, and no doubt was what he genuinely believed. But the focus here has to be on Mr Epihar's intent, not what the officer in that scenario might have believed was happening.
Also on trial is the accused getaway driver, Natalie Bracken, originally charged with accessory after the fact of murder. Today her charge was changed. It's now accessory after the fact of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, because Matthew Hunt hadn't been pronounced dead by the time she allegedly drove away. Yesterday the jury heard a police interview in which Ms Bracken claimed to have been threatened by the gunman. But Mr Dickey says it's unclear why she didn't speak to the police later on.
If she wanted to keep the public safe, if she wanted to keep uniformed officers of the New Zealand Police safe, that's what she could and would have done, and she did not. So that speaks volumes, the Crown says, as to what her motivations were of getting Mr Epihar out of the scene.
The defence has been delivering its closing arguments this afternoon.
A traffic update now. State Highway 2 in the Karangahake Gorge is closed between Pairoa and Waihi after a serious crash. Now, 3 people are reported to be seriously injured, and police say the Karangahake Gorge will be closed for some time while emergency services work to clear the scene there. There are diversions in place, but people are asked to delay travel or avoid the area where possible. Now, on the northern motorway in Auckland, a crash has been blocking the right southbound lane after the Northcote on-ramp. It's now been cleared, but there are still delays there. A South Auckland man says he's lucky to be alive after his family home was targeted in an early morning drive-by shooting. Police say their investigation will look at possible gang links. Meanwhile, one of the home's occupants has told Checkpoint of the moment 6 gunshots were fired as his family slept. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Munro have the story.
An early morning wake-up call from hell. A spray of bullets leaving gaping holes in car and home windows. Shell shrapnel showering the family letterbox. Now, this is the latest in a number of shootings in Auckland South in recent weeks, and one of the occupants who lives here, he's standing just behind us, told us it was an extremely close call. Tuporo Mararoa and his family ran for their lives as the bullets showered the front of his family's Palmer's Road home.
Like about 4 o'clock, yeah, and just heard like 6 gunshots just firing at our house. Then we all just woke up and just ran outside. Yeah, that's all.
Tuporo lives here with 3 family members, his father, his brother and his little sister.
No, everyone was just shocked, eh? Don't even know why this happened. Yeah, it's just out of the blue. It's never happened before. So everyone's just in shock.
What were you doing? I assume you were asleep at the time or what?
Yeah, we were all sleeping. Then just hear a boom. Then everyone just woke up.
As for who might have done this, Tuporo isn't certain, but believes the attempted theft of one of the family's motorbikes in recent weeks could be linked to this morning's drive-by shooting. One thing he does know is he's lucky he wasn't shot. He was fast asleep in a room at the front of the house that's had its window partially blown out.
Right where the window was where my bed is. Yeah, so it was close. But yeah, just lucky nobody got hurt, eh?
Shootings aren't common on this suburban main road. Neighbours of the Palmer's Road house say it's a scare locals don't need.
You'll be shocked, especially if you're getting shot at, you know? You can take someone's life. So all it takes is one moment and you're gone, you know what I mean? Yeah, of course you'll be shocked.
This woman lives directly next door to the house that was targeted. She says she's simply scared.
It will make me, worried because I've got a young kid. I've got 2 children. So it's too scared.
Too close to home.
Yeah, it's too close to home. We don't want anything happen, around us here. This is a quiet place.
The Clendon drive-by shooting follows a spate of gun crimes in Auckland in recent weeks. Last week, a man was shot and injured by police after he went on a rampage that ended in Penrose, allegedly holding a gun to the head of 2 motorists. A Mangere barbershop and bar in Monaco have also been shot up in recent weeks. As for this morning's shootings, police say possible gang links will form part of their investigation.
And if you're listening to that on radio, you can check out that story from our 2 Nicks. It'll go up on our Facebook page. It is almost 18 minutes past 5. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Thanks for listening. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. E haere aki nei, coming up, another record day of COVID cases in the community in Sydney and huge numbers of infectious people still wandering around the suburbs. Pharmacies say they're underutilised and getting mixed messages from health officials despite being an obvious solution to the sluggish COVID vaccine rollout. About 13% of New Zealanders are now fully vaccinated and 19% have had 1 shot, with the rollout set to extend to the general population from next week. Tonight we have the story of 2 pharmacies, but we'll start in the Auckland suburb of Pakuranga, where hundreds are being jabbed a week. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi filed this report.
Almost finished. All done.
Here at Pakuranga Unichem, you can pick up your prescription and get a COVID vaccine. 6 weeks ago, staff here cleared 150 shelves to make way for 2 vaccination stations. Anyone in groups 1 to 3 can get the vaccine, with walk-ins available if there are leftovers at the end of the day. Site lead Vicky Chan explains since then they've had thousands through their doors.
I think last we checked, we have done just over 7,000 doses of the Pfizer vaccination. So, yeah, it's pretty awesome effort by our team.
Most of them are locals.
I think a lot of the patients would be ones that we have always engaged with and had a long-term relationship with. So the support has been amazing. But also I think because our teams actually cater for a lot of different languages as well. So I think that has made it super easy for people to come through and see a familiar face that, I think that had put a lot of our patients at ease.
That's reflected in a packed waiting room, but everyone's happy to wait their turn. Lorraine Field lives nearby and has been a customer for 25 years. Her GP originally sent her to a vaccination supercentre in Highbrook, but this option, closer and more familiar, was a no-brainer.
To be honest, I was really nervous because that's the kind of person I am, but honestly, just coming in here and especially knowing the faces, and yeah, it's all done. So I feel confident.
Smiles and hugs from Vicky is testament to that. Local Sharon brought the whole family along to get their second jab.
Sylvia, my mother-in-law, Beverly, my mother, and my husband David.
They echo the enthusiasm of getting vaxxed at their local.
Oh, much better than having to queue out Highbrook, so that's what put us off going there.
Very good, very easy, very convenient, staff very friendly and helpful, and brilliant.
The team of 7 vaccinators works 7 days a week, 9 to 6 each day, with an early start to prep all the vaccines. And if you're wondering, getting your script won't be slowed down. They've set things up to make sure things are still operating as usual. Manager Pete Guthrie says other vaccination clinics aren't accessible for everyone.
The size sometimes, I think it's a bit daunting when you have a lot of people in an area. There's a lot going on. They're doing an amazing job of looking after a lot of people in a big area, but coming with that there is size and numbers of people, parking, access, lots of things like that. So there's a lot of issues that go with that.
This wall filled with kind words and thank yous is all the encouragement they need. They're on the right track.
OK, so that's in Auckland, but in Wellington, some pharmacies have been told thanks but no thanks when it comes to helping with the vaccine rollout. Ben Latty from the capital's WellWorks pharmacy reckons it's an inconsistent approach from health officials. He says his staff have done the training and can manage high volumes.
We haven't been given any contract for the pharmacy itself. We have sort of from April onwards been helping out the doctors above us and administer COVID vaccinations, sort of subcontracting to them to help them out. So I've been personally have been administering jabs, but not via the pharmacy.
So what have you done to prepare yourselves at the pharmacy to be able to do this when and if you get the call up?
So we've got 6 sort of vaccinating pharmacists, so that they can do flu jabs and all the likes of that, and other sort of different types of vaccinations. But for the COVID jab, particularly, we've all been trained up via an IMAC, course on top of that. So we've got everything sort of ready to go if we were able to get the call up from the DHB. But currently, it just doesn't seem to be happening.
And what about on-site facilities? Whatever cold storage you need, have you got that all in order?
We've certainly got all the fridges like you would for a normal vaccine. We don't have specifically any cold, super cold ones, because they're obviously all held in Auckland and Christchurch, is my understanding. But I mean, the big one for us was when the cold chain got reduced from having to keep it in those super cold freezers. Now you can keep it in a normal fridge for up to 30 days. So I mean, that allows us a big scope to be able to keep, to administer these jabs and not have to throw them out and have that, mitigate that risk of expiring.
So you're basically good to go, is what you're saying?
That's exactly right. So we've done the course. We've got everything set up. We've got 6 vaccinators. We've got 100 car parks outside. We've got it all set up. We've got the space. We could even share, some of the stock of the jabs with our medical centre to, further mitigate that risk of it expiring. We're completely good to go. So it's just we haven't, particularly the Wellington, Hutt Valley and CCDHB, don't seem to want to have a virus at this stage.
So what conversations have you had with the DHB in terms of expressing your interest?
We hadn't heard anything, which by July, early July, we thought was absolutely ridiculous. So we wrote them a pretty friendly, firm but friendly email to say, hey, look, what is going on? Will pharmacy be involved? This is our capacity. This is what we can do. We got an answer back that went straight to the Official Information Act, which we thought was bizarre. We've only just recently got that back, and I've said, look, no, we're not interested at this point. We're going to try and do it all ourselves within the DHB, and there might be a chance that we could do the last 20%, but they're going to try and do at least the minimum 80% of the population in the Wellington region.
So Ben, just so I've got this clear, when you made inquiries of the DHB as to when they might start using pharmacies, including yours, they treated your request for details as an official information request.
That's exactly right. All we wanted was some information, and you'd expect by like early July, we should have had some sort of something. Particularly, if you want to gear up, you need to put things in order to make it all happen. So it's just a shame because pharmacy is such a good, it's a good platform for these vaccines. We've proven ourselves via the flu jabs. I just don't see why they need to be interested. And what really annoys me is, when I go talk to my Dunedin counterparts recently, they're all getting geared up for the jab with the their pharmacy and the likes. But we haven't heard anything. Well, we have heard now, and they're not in.
Why do you think pharmacies are part of the solution?
We've proven that we can do vaccines via the flu jab, very successful sort of flu campaigns each last 8 or 9 years. It's a good platform. We can keep it simple, we can do it efficiently, and accessibly. There are a lot of pharmacies that they're spotted all around the country, and I just think that it's a good place that could help out the DHBs and get this rollout happening. I mean, that's the end of the game.
The argument may be that these, super clinics are the answer. They've got a massive volume that they can put through. I mean, how many COVID vaccinations do you think you could deliver in a week?
That's a good question. I mean, if we had 6 vaccinators rolling, I think they calculate around 12 an hour, possibly. I honestly think we could do more than 12 an hour, maybe 20 an hour times 6 vaccinators, maybe times 8. Sorry, I don't have a calculator. But I'm not saying we'd ever have the scale of those big super vaccinating clinics, but I'm just saying that, we would help sort of with the solution. We can, just get things rolling and help things out.
And when you compare yourselves to those clinics, you say that, you probably can't compete with the volume, but is there a particular, we call it a unique selling point. I know you're not selling anything, but, do you think there's something unique about the pharmacy that will appeal to some people who maybe don't want to go to the clinics, the big ones?
Oh, absolutely. I think just that relationship that a lot of people have with their local pharmacists, that would help. Get them in the doors. They could have it. If they had any concerns around the vaccine, the pharmacists would be obviously highly skilled in that sense. Having that relationship and a familiar face to administering those jabs would help for some, not everyone, but for some people.
So Ben, you've basically had the thanks but no thanks.
That's exactly right. Thanks but no thanks. Maybe see you later.
In a statement, Hutt Valley and Capital and Coast DHBs say they've been working alongside pharmacies across the Wellington region on the rollout for several months. Pharmacies led the rollout of the vaccination program across 46 aged care residential facilities in the region, they say, and it's working on establishing vaccination clinics at Unichem in Kilburnie and a joint centre run by general practices and pharmacy in Porirua. Homai o whakaro, I'd love to hear your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. On the issues of pharmacies, whether you think more of them should be doing COVID jabs, and also GPs. We spoke to GPs yesterday, and some of them have done their training, also waiting to see if they'll get supply. And the Trans-Tasman bubble, meeting at the moment with Cabinet Ministers deciding what should happen. Should we lock it down right now? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's a record breaker, but there's no medals to be had. New South Wales has today reported a new high of 124 COVID cases, with close to 90 of those people wandering in the community while infectious. Greater Sydney is in the 4th week of a lockdown that's expected to last at least another week. State Premier Gladys Berejiklian didn't pull any punches at her daily press conference, with yet more restrictions on the way. Joining us now is Sydney 9 News reporter Charles Croucher. Chapter. Hi, Charles. What is going wrong here? What's not working?
Well, its testing has gone up, which sounds like a Donald Trump kind of answer, but it has in recent times. 85,000 tests were conducted in the last 24 hours. Sadly, they found 124 cases. So what the hope is for both Gladys Berejiklian and every person that is here, and I dare say a lot of your listeners too, who would like that travel bubble to reopen, is that this is the blanket testing that will identify exactly where the Delta variant is and enable it to shut down. But you're right in saying at least 1 week. I think the realist in all of us says probably 3 to 4 at the best case scenario, and there is active discussions that maybe this is something we have to live with in New South Wales, already cut off from New Zealand. We've now, as of 1 a.m. tomorrow morning, the whole state is cut off from the rest of Australia. So an island within an island, and a problem with all those people out there in the community.
So, Charles, not to labour the point here, but when you talk about the state being cut off, some people will take a deep breath here and say, what? You were still travelling between states? What's the deal?
Well, there were, not Sydney, which is where almost all of the cases are, with the exception of a couple of delivery drivers that have been to regional communities. But there are, New South Wales is quite a big state, and so there are a lot of people in regional areas that haven't seen a case anywhere near them for well over 12 months, and they were still free to travel to Queensland in particular, but also Tasmania and some other places. That is now gone. The fear is that this has gone from being an eastern Sydney, the Bondi cluster as it was known, spread in the west of Sydney, and now you're starting to seep into other areas of the community. So that's where the travel was happening. People from Sydney haven't been able to travel since the 26th of June. This is now a month. The big question is when this is going to get sort of down to a normal level, because if we start talking about the end of August or early September, you're talking about rugby tests, you're talking about grand finals, you're talking about school final year exams for some of the people that have been through a horrible 2 years. Those students that are finishing this year, it's a long time they've been in these processes. So a lot of questions to be answered, and there's not a lot more levers the government can pull in terms of how much more they can lock down. We spoke about some of the things you're allowed to do last time we spoke, which was last Thursday.
Yeah.
That's all changed since. Construction's gone, a lot of retail is gone, all those options are now done. And still this Delta strain is spreading, particularly through large family gatherings. Which is still one of the problems. And the big question is now, we've had, in the last 2 days, well in excess of 170,000 tests in New South Wales. Has that put a pinpoint on where the virus is? Can the tracers catch up in time? And can we come back and speak to you in the next few days or next few weeks and say there are no new cases and things can start slowly opening up?
That's not, and listening to Gladys Berejiklian, she's sending pretty clear messages and not particularly positive. I mean, what's she saying?
Well, she's saying that there is still a chance to get in front of this virus, and it involves people not leaving their home except to go shopping. It's now just one person who can go shopping for groceries, and it has to be essential. There is active discussions among the New South Wales Cabinet that this may be the only option is to vaccinate our way out of this problem, and that's something that Gladys Berejiklian has started pivoting towards as well. She wants to see more pharmacies that can now do it, more GPs vaccinating, they've already been vaccinating, and more supply from the federal government, which has become an issue as well. But if the solution is to vaccinate your way out of this problem, and then we are talking about being months away from being out of the solution, out of the problem, talking about 8 weeks between jabs, that's the bare minimum, and that's if everyone gets it done tomorrow, which we know they won't. So we're still a long way out. If that is the solution, that would be effectively waving the white flag and staying in a holding pattern for a number of months before getting through this. The government is still hopeful they can crush the virus, that is, they can entirely constrain it, get that number back down to zero on a daily basis. The problem being there's not a lot of precedent for an outbreak of this size with this strain of the virus of being stopped. In fact, there is no precedent. So we're doing something that hasn't been done before.
She basically told you to assume the brace position, didn't she, Charles?
Oh, we've been braced for a while, but yeah, this is a really big one. And Gladys Berejiklian said it's going to get worse before it gets better. So, look, realistically, if the numbers don't come down by, say, Sunday, Monday, that would be when the big restrictions have set in last weekend. Give it 5 days for the restrictions to flow through to the case numbers. If we start seeing a downturn, then, well, there's green shoots and maybe there's a future. If not, we'll be having these phone calls possibly every week, because that's the only way we're going to be able to communicate for a while to come. The other bad thing is we've seen hospitalisations go up, and ICU numbers, particularly in the last few days. And what that means is, of course, that the lag from the cases becoming hospitalisations, then from the hospitalisations becoming put on ventilators. So we hope that trend doesn't continue. But, all the numbers are going in the wrong direction. Option number one, still contain it, crush the virus. Option number two is to vaccinate our way out of it. And there is a big difference both in cost and lifestyle for everyone in New South Wales and for the Trans-Tasman bubble as well over the next few months between those two options.
Good to talk to you, Charles. That is a locked down Charles Croucher, who's a Sydney 9 News reporter. E te iwi e haere ake nei I a checkpoint. The Trade Minister speaks out about the spat with China over hack attacks. Christchurch's budget stadium, well, it could end up costing the city top sports events, some people think, and the top secret dinosaur dig somewhere in the UK. Homai o whakaro, we love your feedback, so do get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpoint@rnz, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Susanna.
A jury has been told Eli Epiha was intent on killing police officers last June, so chose the most efficient of two weapons and acted without empathy. In the High Court at Auckland, Epiha admits murdering Matthew Hunt and dangerous driving causing injury, but denies the attempted murder of another officer, David Goldfinch. In his closing address, Crown Prosecutor Brian Dickey told the jury Epiha could have helped the wounded officers but calmly sauntered off. An occupant of the house targeted in a drive-by shooting in the Auckland suburb of Clendon early this morning says he's lucky to be alive. Tuporo Maroroa, who lives in the house with his father, brother and younger sister, believes 6 shots were fired at it. He says the family rushed to the rear of the property to avoid being hit. The fate of the Trans-Tasman bubble is in question, with Cabinet Ministers calling a special virtual meeting this afternoon to discuss the border arrangement. Any announcement won't come until tomorrow, but RNZ understands a total pause is on the table. Quarantine-free travel is already paused from New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. Christchurch councillors have voted to reduce the capacity of its new stadium in a bid to stop ballooning costs. The initial plan was for the indoor stadium to have 30,000 seats, but councillors voted this afternoon to reduce it to 25,000 to avoid an $88 million budget blowout. The flood-battered Bulla District communities will receive more government funding to assist them as they recover. Acting Emergency Management Minister Chris Farfoy announced an extra $1 million contribution today. The director of the opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics, Sentaro Kobayashi, has been sacked. It follows criticism over past comments he made during his career as a comedian, which have been described as anti-Semitic. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho nau mai, hoki mai. You're listening to Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa anai nei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona joins me live in the studio to talk all things business. A lot of paper with you today, Nona, as well, so there must be some big news. Okay, let's talk about the big power companies that are looking at large green hydrogen plants in Southland.
Right.
So what's the green sky thinking?
Where's the plan? Okay, so we're talking about Contact Energy and Meridian in this case, and they have come up with a report, which was they commissioned the report from a global consultancy with some, reputation, McKinsey & Co. And they have basically said that they've done a feasibility study of whether or not green hydrogen plant in Southland would make sense. A lot of people might not know what green hydrogen is, but it's basically hydrogen gas that's produced using renewable energy. So there's other ways to make hydrogen gas. You can use fossil fuels, for example, natural gas, that kind of thing. But this is talking about using renewable energy. And basically the process works as like an electrolysis. You split water into hydrogen and oxygen, and then the hydrogen gas can be used as a fuel source. Now, it's not that straightforward, and the market for it is questionable, and that's one of the next things that Contact Energy and Meridian are going to embark on. They're going to now go around the world and find out what people want from green hydrogen and, whether it's feasible to ship it in bottles or in other forms that could be used, for example, as a fertilizer.
That raises a whole lot of other issues, shipping, because you're trying to make something that isn't using up energy, isn't producing carbon miles, and then you're going to stick it on some form of transport and send it over the waters.
Well, I didn't write the report.
No, but interesting.
But it's very interesting. And certainly there are people who do not think this is a viable scheme in any form. But nevertheless, I spoke with the Southland Development Corporation today, and they said that not only did they get interest from Meridian and Contact, but lots of international interest as well. So watch this space. Let's find out what's going to happen. But believe me, it's not just around the corner. We're talking about a plan that would take maybe 5 years to develop, and a plant like this would cost about $1 billion. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. And if it does happen, one of the things the report says is that it would need some government support. So we'll see what happens with that.
Let's talk about house prices, right? So surging house prices. Obviously, it's made a few people feel like they're wealthy, but what's happening in the savings department?
Well, not so much. So it's just another one. So last year, you might recall, how it's hard to forget, we were in level 4 lockdown, and that was towards the end of March. So not very much money was spent during that period. And so savings went up. I guess people were really worried, so they saved their money. And so this year they thought, forget it, we'll just go out and spend it. And that's what they did. They spent up their money in all sorts of ways. One of the things was an increase in spending on accommodation, restaurants, cultural service, durable goods. People really went and had a big time spending up. So our
They might have
savings
needed cheering up, Nona. Maybe they were cheering themselves up. I say that seriously.
And also they were encouraged to spend with all that easy money out there and low interest rates. So that was the whole idea, was to get people to spend. And they did. And so they saved a lot less. However, interestingly, our overall measure of worth increased because of house prices, but not just because of house prices. So it was also because people were getting a lot more out of their investments, like bonds and shares and other kinds of things. So overall, we're probably better off in terms of our assets, but not so much about what we have in our bank account.
Okay, let's take a gold medal style sprint around the
Why
markets.
not? Well, look, there was a rally in Asia today, and so our market rose 12 points, just 12 points. That's like 0.01%, not very much, to 12,721. And the dollar at 69.6 US cents and 94.6 Australian and 50.7 pence. Not that we're going anywhere, but...
Thanks, Nona. Nona Baltio with Business. The Trade Minister says security and trade are separate issues when it comes to China. This week, New Zealand joined its Western allies in condemning China for state-sponsored cyber attacks. At a trade policy roadshow in Auckland, Damien O'Connor said he isn't expecting any retaliation and is working on trade agreements so businesses can have more options. Chen Liu reports.
The political side of trading with China has some businesses concerned. Frank Olsen, who is the president of the New Zealand Europe Business Council, is among them.
And it seems that the gap is opening up between what the politicians want and what their businesses want.
But others aren't worried about trade relationships, like Chinese-owned dairy company Yashili New Zealand, which exports 70% of its products to China. Amanda Zhu is its commercial manager.
I think for a long time we keep good relation between two countries, and our export and no any issues between these two countries. So I'm not really worried about that.
Trade Minister Damien O'Connor doesn't think the criticism is going to cause trade retaliation.
This is a security issue, it's not a trade issue. We have no reason to believe that there should be any reaction.
He says New Zealand will continue to have healthy trade connections with China, which is, quote, a significant trading partner, but they are exploring other opportunities.
If you're a small business, a big business, or you're a country and you have a huge reliance on any one market, then that exposes you. And that's why we're building trade agreements and trade connections with a whole range of markets so that our exporters and importers can have a range of options.
Vangelis Vitalis is the Deputy Secretary of Trade and Economic at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He says China is a key trading relationship for New Zealand and many other countries. And although trading is an important driver of export growth, employment and productivity here is not the only thing.
At the same time, what you hope to have with China is to have a mature relationship where you can talk about the range of things that are important to New Zealanders, not just business, but to New Zealanders in general as well as business.
Mr. Vitalis says the free trade agreement with China has given businesses advantages, but diversification has been a challenge for nearly 30 years. For example, the government has been negotiating with the EU for 5 years, and it took more than a decade to launch those talks.
If we're going to talk about diversification, we are actually going to need these free trade agreements to give us that levelling of the playing field so people have choice. And then businesses can make their own decisions about where they need to be. It's not my business to tell people where they should go or where they should export, but it is my business to try to make sure that there are those opportunities and those opportunities are fair.
Trade Minister Damien O'Connor says the government is working through challenges and is determined to reach a free trade agreement with the UK by the end of August.
A boys' home watchman quit his job after seeing a boy being beaten to a near pulp, the inquiry into abuse and care has heard. Puloto Arthur Gus Solomon was 26 when he was employed by All Wairaka Boys' Home in 1970. But he stayed for just 4 weeks as he couldn't bear it any longer. Our reporter Andrew McRae has been at the hearing in Mangere.
Pulutu Solomon's evidence was read to the Royal Commission by his daughter Tupe Solomon Tanoa. Pulutu was told by other staff not to fraternise with the boys because if you do, you look weak.
I could tell they were reluctant to say anything. But after a couple of weeks of talking to them, I think some of them knew that I was on their side. But I didn't want to push it because if they were found talking to me, then they would be in trouble. It was a sad place.
He says a staff member asked if he knew what went on in the secure unit after boys who ran away were brought back. He replied he didn't.
He said that we put them in there for the night and next day. We, referring to the guards, go in and we give them such a thrashing that they do not want to go out again.
Pulotu said one incident really shocked him and helped him make up his mind to leave. It involved a staff member lunging at a boy and punching and kicking him.
I thought to myself, what is going on here? The boy was on the floor. His mate was standing there, and so was I. As this poor kid was hammered to a pulp. It happened so fast.
A colleague's advice was, keep your trap shut, just do your work and don't say too much.
It made me question what was going on there, but she would reassure me, saying, no, just play it by the book. So I left it at that.
He says his children in welfare homes are there for a reason. There's no use in sending them to a place where people do not look after them properly.
What these kids need are people to be supportive, talk to them, care for them, be patient with them and listen to them.
Pulotu Solomon says welfare homes need staff who are of high standing, with good morals and a good upbringing, who'll lift standards. He says it comes down to the quality of the people that run the institutions.
Let's get to some of your feedback now on the Trans-Tasman Bubble. Cabinet's meeting at the moment to talk about what to do with that. Brian says that clang you hear is the border closing, as it must. On the issue of pharmacies and whether more of them should be involved in the COVID vaccine rollout, Sheena reckons there's no space to wait the 20 minutes you have to check whether you're having any side effects at a pharmacy, and this is essential. Another listener, though, says, yes, pharmacies, ideal places for COVID jabs. And another person reckons, I will never attend a mega vaccine centre. If I can't get vaccinated at my doctor's or at a pharmacy I trust, then I won't get vaccinated. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki i ngā pitipiti kōrero. After the news at 6, Christchurch councillors ditch plans for a budget-busting stadium in favour of a plain pack version, but could it cost them in the long run? An impending tropical cyclone looks set to bring some action to the surfing competition at the Olympics this weekend. It's the first time the sport has been included, and 2 New Zealand surfers are hoping to make a splash. Athletes had been preparing for smaller waves, but a new weather system looks set to bring some big swells. Ane te kairi poata Maya Burry. Here's our reporter Maya Burry from Tokyo.
Masks, temperature checks, social distancing and daily COVID tests have done nothing to dull the buzz amongst New Zealand's first two Olympic surfers. Whangamata's Ella Williams and Raglan's Billy Stearman are preparing to take to the water this week after surfing was one of 6 new sports added to the Summer Games. Despite this being a COVID Olympics, Williams has only good things to say about her experience so far.
Yeah, the experience so far has been mind-blowing and I feel like it's Christmas for me. I'm so excited. I'm walking around and there's all these incredible athletes around us and it's like a Disneyland for us athletes.
Coach Matt Scorange says while they may be surrounded by incredible athletes, he's confident both Williams and Stearman have what it takes to bring home a medal. He says there has been a lot of heightened energy the last couple of days, but his job is to keep them focused on the task ahead.
These two ride good energy. They love it. So I don't want to stop them from fizzing. It's a part of who they are, and we want to use that as a tool to help them succeed. So, it's a kind of new sort of journey as a coach because you've got so much other factors, but we're just going to use it to our advantage.
For Billy Stearman, a year-long detour on the road to Tokyo 2020 hasn't been a bad thing. After an injury at the start of last year, he was unsure if he'd even be able to compete.
If anything, the year, postponement was very beneficial for me. It gave me time to rehab and kind of get my body and mind back into 100%. Now the time has come when we're here amongst it, and I'm definitely ready to compete now, and I cannot wait to put the rash shirt on.
The surfing will take place on Surigasaki Beach, about 100 kilometres from the capital. Billy Stearman says while a competition without spectators will feel different, he won't let it be a distraction.
Once you're out in the ocean, you're kind of in your own little bubble anyway, you're in your own little zone, and you can kind of block out from anything else. So that's what we've been practicing on, especially at home, a lot in preparation, breathing and kind of controlling your heart rate and focusing on what you can achieve in front of you and not worrying about any other things outside of, your comp zone.
Here on the streets of Tokyo today, it's a scorching 33 degrees. But while the sun may be unrelenting, the surfing athletes had actually been preparing for some pretty small and gutless waves on Japan's east coast. However, that outlook has improved, with the tropical storm forming south of Japan expected to bring with it some bigger swells. Coach Matt Scorange says while it's not the conditions they had expected, bigger waves are welcome.
This new swell has sort of thrown a slight spanner in the works that it's actually going to be quite good. But at the end of the day, all surfers love good waves. So, you prepare for the worst, and when the waves are good, you just let it shine. So these two can do it in any condition at the end of the day. So, yeah, it's going to be exciting when that swell arrives.
The men's and women's surfing heats will get underway on Sunday. Brisbane is celebrating after the Queensland capital was confirmed as the host for the 2032 Olympics and Paralympics. It'll cost the city billions of dollars, but advocates argue there are clear benefits for the local economy. The ABC's Annie Guest has this report.
The International Olympic Committee has the honour to announce that the Games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane, Australia.
And the cheers went up from Tokyo to Brisbane's South Bank, where thousands gathered to hear the announcement.
Oh, I am emotional. Congratulations, Brisbane! It's just beautiful, great. We needed this so much. We needed this at this time.
Why do you think we needed it?
Because we're going through such difficult times with COVID. This is a beautiful celebration, a beautiful moment for Brisbane and for Australia.
We have a chance to being in the Olympics at that time because we'll be the right age.
Oh, you'd like to compete? What sport?
High jump, maybe?
Back in Japan, the International Olympic Committee's vote was quickly welcomed by Queensland's Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk.
We've done it Queensland, we've done it Brisbane, this is fantastic, it's amazing. Tonight is your night, enjoy.
The Olympics is estimated to cost billions of dollars, including for new swimming, basketball and gymnastics venues, and rebuilding the Gabba.
If you use the Olympics wisely, you can have a lot of economic benefit from it.
Professor of Economics Tim Harcourt from the University of Technology, Sydney, estimates the Games will bring up to $8 billion in economic benefits to Queensland and double that Australia-wide.
Principally, the benefits for taxpayers would be for those in tourism areas, so in visiting Brisbane for the Games and then moving on to the Barrier Reef, far north Queensland and so on, and maybe the rest of Australia. The other thing where there may be benefit is if there's infrastructure built partially for the Olympics, but that is also useful for the community after the Olympics is over.
Many hope the Games will boost Australia's sport participation. One study shows a modest increase in children playing sport in the 3 years after the Sydney Games. But other research shows no evidence of adults becoming more active.
A health pass is being rolled out in France, but MPs there are debating what venues it should be required at. It shows someone's vaccination, immunity or test status for COVID and is needed to enter museums, cinemas and some sports centres. But they're considering extending it to bars, restaurants and public transport. The BBC's Lucy Williamson has been talking to those who are for and against the new rules.
Hidden behind the well-worn bar and rattling coffee machine of Le Monsigny Bistro, manager Daniel Decatre is starting the lunch service. If the government gets its way, Daniel will have to verify each one of his customers' COVID status from next month.
Je ne demanderai jamais le pass sanitaire.
I'm never going to ask people for the health pass. I'm not a policeman. I don't have that kind of authority.
Tucking into their lunch outside, financiers Mathieu and Hubert were much more relaxed.
I mean, honestly, it's hard to be against because we need to deal with it. So we've got no choice.
If we want to avoid another confinement and keep the economy going, no choice.
Down the street, Regis Fèvre, executive chef at another bistro, Le Mesteret, said he wasn't sure they'd survive another lockdown, but the health pass would put new pressures on staff.
Des grands établissements étoilés.
Big Michelin-starred restaurants can employ someone just to carry out the controls, but for small bistros like ours, it means one person short on the floor. Do we have the authority to carry out controls and ask for ID cards? And how will people take it if they are refused? Will some of them be violent, either verbally or physically?
A majority of those surveyed in France support the government plan. But this being France, opposition to it has been vocal too. More than 100,000 people protested against the health pass last weekend, and there were fresh protests outside the National Assembly today.
A traffic update now. State Highway 2 in the Karangahake Gorge is closed between Pairoa and Waihi after a serious crash there. Now, police say the gorge will be closed for some time while emergency services work to clear the scene. Experts from London's Natural History Museum have started excavating one of the most important Jurassic sites in the UK. The team are working at a secret location, believed to hold tens of thousands of fossils from 167 million years ago. The BBC's Rebecca Morrell has more.
A race against time to reveal our Jurassic past. The team from the Natural History Museum has just 3 days to excavate this unique site.
Look how long they are.
That's really cool. The Cotswold Quarry holds a treasure trove of sea creatures that lived 167 million years ago. What's here is so extraordinary, the location is being kept secret.
We've got another really nice, exceptional specimen here. It's actually a brittle star. It's likely to be a new species. It's the quality of preservation, it's the number of fossils that we're finding, but it's also the diversity. It's really unprecedented in geological sites of this age across the world.
A small and very muddy quarry, but when you get down here and look up close, there are fossils everywhere. The place is teeming with them. Before you even start to dig, you see some lying on the ground, like this starfish. You can see the delicate detail on its arms. This area was a delta back in the Jurassic period, where a river ran into a shallow tropical sea. Underwater were animals like starfish and sea urchins, and meadows of creatures called crinoids, some anchored to the sea floor with stalks, while others swam freely. Spindly brittle stars and sea cucumbers added to this abundance of ancient marine life.
It's quite a heavy old piece.
The site was discovered by local fossil hobbyists Nev and Sally.
It's a slab of life.
But at first, the quarry didn't look too promising.
We were finding very small fragments of like plates of sea urchins, just tiny, tiny fragments though, nothing really spectacular. When we got it home and cleaned it up, he was like, "Oh my God, Sal, you've got to come and see this." And this is beautiful Jurassic sea creature coming to life. They're amazing. They're just as like they were alive yesterday.
In 200 years, the Natural History Museum has only collected a few dozen fossils like these in the UK. Now, more than 1,000 will be added to the collection. The team says it's the discovery of a lifetime.
Right, we've got breaking news here and an update on the orca tour. A decision has been made by the Department of Conservation to move the calf from the temporary pool at Plimmerton back into a sea pen. They say the calf's health has been assessed and vets have determined it would be in the best interests of it to return to a larger area. The calf has injuries to his pectoral fins and tail fluke and needs to stretch out in deeper water, they say. It also has an issue with an inflamed eye, which vets believe would respond better in salt water. The calf has also been more lethargic today and not vocalising as much as previously.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The lawyer for Eli Epiha says his only intention was to flee the police when he killed Officer Matthew Hunt last June and shot another officer in the leg. Epiha is on trial in the High Court at Auckland, where he admits murder and dangerous driving, but denies the attempted murder of Officer David Goldfinch. In a closing statement this afternoon, Epiha's lawyer, Mark Edgar, told the jury it would be easy to empathise with Mr Goldfinch, who might have believed his life was in danger.
Feeling the bullets, seeing the divots explode around him, that was powerful rhetoric, and no doubt was what he genuinely believed. But the focus here has to be on Mr Epiha's intent, not what the officer in that scenario might have believed was happening.
Mark Edgar says there's no evidence Epiha fired at Mr Goldfinch as he ran away. The lawyer for an accused getaway driver says she helped a gunman flee after police officer Matthew Hunt's murder so he wouldn't keep killing. Natalie Bracken is on trial alongside Eli Epiha in the High Court at Auckland after he shot 2 officers last June in Massey, killing Mr Hunt. She's charged with accessory after the fact of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. In a closing statement today, Ms Bracken's lawyer Adam Couchman says she thought she was doing the right thing. He says getting the gunman out of there almost certainly prevented further carnage. The fate of the Trans-Tasman bubble is in question, with Cabinet Ministers calling a special virtual meeting this afternoon to discuss the border arrangement. Any announcement won't come until tomorrow, but RNZ understands a total pause is on the table. Quarantine-free travel is already paused from New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. The Australian Prime Minister has apologised for the country's slow COVID-19 vaccination rollout. Australia is a few weeks behind schedule, although a record 184,000 doses have been administered in the past 24 hours. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, says it's heartbreaking that unvaccinated people are in hospital or dying with the virus.
I take responsibility for the vaccination program. I also take responsibility for the challenges we've had. Obviously, some things within our control, some things that are not. I'm keen to ensure, as we have been over these many months, that we've been turning this around. I'm certainly sorry that we haven't been able to achieve the marks that we had hoped for at the beginning of this year.
New South Wales has hit a new high of 124 daily cases in its latest outbreak. A 44-year-old Tasmanian man has died after receiving his first dose of the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. He was a confirmed case of the rare and recently identified TTS, a vaccine-induced thrombosis, and his death will be investigated by the coroner. According to an update from the Australian Therapeutic Goods Administration, the death was one of 2 in the last week. The second was a 48-year-old woman from Victoria. The Christchurch Mayor says the council has made the right decision to reduce the capacity of its new stadium in a bid to stop ballooning costs. The initial plan was for the indoor stadium to have 30,000 seats, but council has voted this afternoon to reduce it to 25,000 to avoid an $88 million budget blowout. Mayor Leanne Dalzell says reducing the capacity is the city's sweet spot, and the cost of a larger stadium for 1 or 2 large-scale events each year would be irresponsible. District health boards have reported $1.1 billion could be owed to current and former staff in incorrect annual leave payments, and that amount is growing. The board's non-compliance with the Holidays Act was first reported by the Office of the Auditor General 5 years ago. In the recently released 2019-2020 audit, it found money owed to current and former staff goes back more than 10 years in some cases, and paying the money needs to be a top priority. The Office of the Auditor General noted funding in this year's budget to help coordinate the work needed to determine how much it is owed. The director of the opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics has stepped down after it emerged he once joked about the Holocaust. It's the latest staffing scandal to hit the Games, as World Watch's Max Toll reports.
Kentaro Kobayashi was apparently ousted hours after footage emerged of the comedian mocking the Holocaust in a skit in the 1990s. He was to direct the opening ceremony, which takes place tomorrow night. Just earlier this week, the official composer for the ceremony, Keigo Oyamada, pulled out after old interviews resurfaced showing him admitting to bullying a disabled child. This all comes ahead of an Olympics many believe shouldn't be happening. Infections are already creeping up among athletes and officials, and there's been a steady rise in daily cases in the capital.
It's 5 minutes past 6. The New Zealand under-24 men's football team wants to leave a mark at their third Olympic Games. The Ollie Whites have failed to advance to the knockout rounds in 2008 and 2012, but have received a favourable draw in Japan. New Zealand will play South Korea, Honduras and Romania in pool play, starting with the Koreans tonight. And striker Chris Wood is upbeat at what they can achieve.
There's some exciting young talent coming through, and I think we're quietly confident that we could turn some heads, but it's about believing in ourselves and doing the business on the pitch when it comes to it.
Kick-off's at 8 o'clock New Zealand time. Young New Zealand cyclist Finn Fisher-Black is joining Tour de France champion Tadej Pogacar at UAE Team Emirates. The 19-year-old will make his debut for the World Tour team this weekend after signing a deal through until the end of 2024. Paul Cole's run at the World Squash Champs in Chicago is over. The New Zealand number 1 was beaten 3-1 by second seed Mohammed Al-Shabagi in the semi-finals, going down 5-11, 3-11, 11-4, 8-11. Cole was the first player to take a game off the Egyptian all-tournament. And the National Basketball League semi-finals are in Porirua tonight. The first playoff between the Wellington Saints and Auckland Huskies has just tipped off, with the Hawke's Bay Hawks to then square off with the Southland Sharks at 8 o'clock. The winners will meet in the grand final tomorrow. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Our Changing World looks at bacterial evolution. This week's overseas correspondent, William Yang, is on the line from Taiwan. Rick Coleman, who spoke to us from COVID-hit Italy during the lockdown, discusses his frustrated attempts to get home, despite being fully vaccinated. And Jan Eldridge on the facts behind the sci-fi of the Star Trek Mind Swap episode, Turnabout Intruder, Kirk at his best, on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
The short forecast from Med Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taranaki, Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taumaranui and Taupo. Fine spells, isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine tonight, a few showers tomorrow, clearing from Hawke's Bay in the afternoon. Whanganui and Taihape to Wellington, also Wairarapa. A few showers clearing from the south tomorrow morning and afternoon. For Nelson and Northern Marlborough, scattered showers, clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. Remainder of Marlborough and Canterbury, rain, clearing south of Christchurch by the evening and elsewhere overnight. Fine weather tomorrow. Bulla, showers clearing tonight. Fine tomorrow, apart from isolated showers in the north. Westland and Fiordland, fine apart from isolated showers in Fiordland. Otago and Southland, a few showers for Southland and Clutha tonight. Fine tomorrow, apart from the odd shower about Stewart Island. And Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tonight, then clearing tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa, nau mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Christchurch is getting a stripped-back version of its planned indoor stadium, but the budget-friendly pick could cost the city in the long run. The initial plan was for the indoor stadium to have up to 30,000 seats, but councillors voted this afternoon to reduce it to 25,000 seats to keep a lid on costs. It was estimated the original design could run $88 million plus over budget. Some Cantabrians think scaling back could be short-sighted.
Budget blowouts, I guess, aren't much of a surprise when it comes to sort of a Christchurch rebuild, but I mean, if you're going to put all that money into investing in a facility, you may as well get sort of the full bang for your buck and be able to have those large-scale events which you're after. I think we've missed having those big games and also like all of the sort of big international acts that come with having just that larger stadium, and I think being able to bring those back into the city would be such a, I guess, important thing for the Christchurch area.
I feel like I can see both sides, but I think it probably would bring more tourists in, and so ultimately I think maybe it would be worth spending more money so that we could fit more people in to the stadium.
I mean, I think the stadium itself is expensive, so if there's a $130 million blowout, then maybe look at reducing the capacity and paying on an as-you-go basis for any matches or concerts or rugby games. You know, it's a lot of money. You know, they're suggesting the All Blacks might charge $1.2 million to play a game here with the reduced seating. So that's fine, you know, rather pay $1.2 million for every time they play, rather than $131 million just to get 5,000 extra people in.
I think that's pretty crap, you know. I think we should add more so like it can give like the community something to watch, and like everybody supports the All Blacks, so I think we're good as well.
Well, Christchurch City Councillor Yanni Johansson joins me there now. Kia ora, Yanni. So a mixed bag of reaction from people on the streets of Christchurch. I mean, what did you vote for? The reduced stadium?
No, I actually voted against the reduced stadium because in my view, there's huge risk attached to this project. And even with the reduced scope, I still fundamentally feel that the location was wrong. In my view, given that the money, the budget blowout for what was proposed is significant, you know, $130 million, the most sensible thing to do would be go back to the drawing board, build it back at Lancaster Park, realise the value of the land, develop it into housing, which would equally create a central city vibrancy. We want people living in the central city, and then we could have afforded to build a stadium that had a decent capacity.
So what? The council's pushing ahead with a white elephant?
Well, I think you need to take a step back and look at the underlying problem post-earthquake with Christchurch and a number of anchor projects. The huge expense has been incurred when the government announced that it would put public facilities onto private land. So just simply the cost of buying the land has been massive to essentially move the stadium, which is already in the central city in Phillipstown, about 3 or 4 blocks closer to the square. So I just don't think you can justify the huge cost that's attached to it when you have actually a location that has worked well historically and that you can still get vibrancy in the central city. But, I mean, fundamentally, we do run the risk, given the way in which professional sports is going in New Zealand, that you've got an increasing call on ratepayers in various cities across New Zealand to build bigger and bigger stadiums without any guarantee that the All Blacks will play, because we're then also asked, after we've spent the huge amount of capital, to put in huge bid incentive funds, and whoever gives the biggest bid incentive to New Zealand rugby ends up with the matches. So even if we build a big stadium, there is no guarantee that we will get those Tier 1 All Blacks games that people want.
So, Yanni, are you saying you're being held to ransom by professional sport, in particular rugby, in New Zealand?
Well, I think especially in the COVID-19 environment, you'd have to say we face a very uncertain future, but you can see the financial struggles with rugby in Australia. You can see some of the discussions that have been had around in South Africa and the Tri Nations. I think fundamentally a professional sports system in New Zealand that relies on councils and ratepayers continuously being asked to take out ever-increasing loans to build bigger stadiums and to pay the operational cost and subsidising extraordinary player salaries is a completely unsustainable model going forward. It actually needs a coordinated approach across the country, I believe, because it's simply not sustainable for us to continuously put in more and more money and to subsidise the global game of rugby.
So what kind of fees were you told that you might have to pay if you're only going with the smaller stadium to attract the games?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other concern, is that the fees would be significant.
Like what?
It was
Can you give us a figure?
I can't, sorry, that information was in the public excluded section of the meeting. But what I can say is that...
So over $1 million to get them there?
One of the really clear pieces of information that we have received is that even if you had a smaller size stadium, the incentive costs would be far less than the $130 million of building 5,000 extra seats. I mean, that was without question the key point that was taken from today's council meeting, is that spending $130 million on a bigger stadium for less money going into incentive bids was still a very not prudent investment.
Right, so basically, Yanni, you're saying it's more cost effective to write New Zealand Rugby a cheque every time you want to attract a top tier game rather than build a bigger stadium, right?
So that was really clear from the information that we were presented with. And you have to recognise that you might be lucky to get an All Blacks game if you can get one. You might get one every year if you're lucky, but more likely once every 2 years. And so when you look at the attendance to the events, for example, one of the concerns I've raised from the investment case from the start is the attendance figures that we've been given. To say 7,000 people on average attending NPC games, well, certainly that doesn't, I think, bear reality in terms of how many people have actually been showing up. And what you can see is you always tend to see with these big projects the overestimation of the benefits that accrue to justify the extraordinary cost attached.
Okay, so people can fully understand your decision. Give us a ballpark for how much you were told that these fees may cost you if you were going to host a rugby game. More than $1 million?
I can't go into things that were discussed in the public excluded section of the council meeting. But I think, one thing I would welcome is the fact that council actually did discuss the substantive decision in public today. That has been something that I've been pushing for greater transparency around these sorts of decisions. Obviously, if there's commercial sensitive information, that's not able to be put out there into the public, but it is significant. That's the trade-off, right? You have a smaller stadium, then you have to pay more in incentive bids if you want to even attempt to get some of these bigger events.
So they're playing you off against each other. They are holding you to ransom.
It's going on across New Zealand. It's certainly been an emerging trend, and I think that speaks to the problem of the financial unsustainability of the professional sports model in New Zealand. You've now seen, obviously, with the All Blacks, looking at private equity coming in from overseas countries like the USA.
So what should happen then?
Well, in my view, but again, this wasn't the majority decision of council, I would have built the Lancaster Park back at Lancaster Park. And I think the other thing is you need a coordinated approach with central government. Clearly, there needs to be a national strategy around major events in New Zealand. We are a country of, 5 million people, and to have every city competing against each other, again, it's just completely unsustainable in the long run.
So, Yanni, this is happening. You're getting a smaller stadium, right? So that is the position you now find yourself in. So given that you're getting a smaller stadium, what do you want to happen around these games? Because you've just outlined a system that you say is unworkable, that different cities are being played off against each other, and it sounds like rugby is charging you big bucks to get a look in here. So what should happen?
What's happened.
So what should happen in the way that runs?
Well, in my view, if I had my way, I would absolutely expect a guarantee from New Zealand Rugby about a certain number of matches of certain tier games. I don't see any reason why New Zealand Rugby should not make a commitment to Christchurch. I mean, we have been through the most extraordinary decade of disaster and tragedy. We still have massive challenges to fix our earthquake-damaged infrastructure like broken roads in the east, our three waters, and our social housing. The idea that ratepayers should be funding professional sports and gold-plating the central city at a time when we have got huge pressures on doing the basics is something that I find really challenging. So it would be nice to think that New Zealand Rugby would give a firm guarantee, and this was asked when we discussed the investment case originally in 2019, can you give us a guarantee of matches? And I think it would be the fair thing to do.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Christchurch City Councillor Jani Johansson. A skipper's bravery in the face of death and precautions that could have saved him are at the heart of a maritime report out today. Former ACT Party candidate Stuart Peterson died after his 14-metre sloop took on water off Cape Brett in Northland in October 2019. Here's Sam Ollie reporting from Northland. Anai te kai ripoata a Sam Ollie a te tai tokorau.
Yacht skipper Stuart Peterson was instrumental in the survival of his three crew, today's Maritime New Zealand findings say. On their way back from Fiji, in bad weather, waves smashed against the boat's uncovered cockpit windows, they exploded and water burst in. Furniture broke loose and crew members were submerged in water after sending out a distress message. Mr. Peterson's wife Pamela and two others survived the sinking after being rescued by helicopter 2 hours later. But when their skipper was winched to safety, he was no longer alive. All were experienced sailors. Before his death, Mr. Peterson got a crew member who was on deck out from underwater and made sure crew members got into a life raft. Yachting New Zealand Chief Executive David Abercrombie, also an old friend of Mr. Peterson's, says he put others first.
The report demonstrates that Stu was particularly brave in making sure that he did everything that he could to save the lives of the others on the boat.
The report found that Stuart Peterson's death could have been avoided if the windows on his vessel, the Essence, were covered. High equipment standards were otherwise maintained and surpassed requirements. The findings have led to a safety rule change to ensure windows 2 square feet or larger are covered during international voyages. Previously, covers had to be on board, but not necessarily fitted. Maritime New Zealand Northern Compliance Manager Neil Roworth hopes the change will prevent similar tragedies.
When New Zealand registered pleasure vessels leave the country, the inspection that they have to have before they leave will ensure that adequate storm covers are available and in place to prevent the windows from breaking in the way that they did on the Essence.
Bruce Carley had been out on the Essence with his friend Stuart previously and says he took extremely good care of his yacht and extremely good care of his crew. He says his old friend was a popular Tauranga community member and very caring.
Extremely generous and very diligent. There were no half measures with Stu. If he wanted something to be done, he would go absolutely all out to achieve it. And if he saw that somebody needed some help, he would give them every assistance available.
ACT leader David Seymour says the loss of Stuart Peterson is still very fresh for party members. He says he was a great man with a gleam in his eye and gone too soon.
I remember people in an internal Facebook group saying there's a yacht missing, it could be Stu, and I thought, no, not a chance, that wouldn't happen to Stu. And of course, that's what tragedies are like. They suddenly become real. We feel a huge sense of loss and sadness.
David Seymour hopes the report brings the Peterson family some closure, and he says his thoughts are with them.
It's 21 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A top Japanese chief executive predicts major economic loss for the country due to hosting the Olympics and says the Games are quickly losing their commercial value. Not having fans in the stadiums could cost Japan's economy $1.8 billion. CNN's Selena Wang has more.
The Olympics, normally a golden opportunity to boost corporate image. But this year, the fear is brand damage because of intense opposition to the Games in Japan. After Japanese sponsors spent a record of more than $3 billion to be associated with the 5 rings, COVID-19 cases are surging, spectators largely banned, while the Japanese public, just 20% of them fully vaccinated, are urged to stay at home during the games. Sponsor plans are falling flat. I'm at the top of Tokyo Skytree, the world's tallest broadcasting tower. It's one of many Japanese Olympic sponsors that have had to cancel or scale back promotional events tied to the games. We were planning to hold events to boost the mood for the Olympics, but because of COVID, it's not the right time to hold a festival, he tells me. We've canceled events, a viewing site, and torch relay through our viewing spot. Toyota, a top Olympic sponsor, is not airing Olympic-related TV commercials. The editorial board of another sponsor, Asahi Shimbun newspaper, called for a cancellation in May. There's little Olympic spirit in the host city. Tokyo is in a state of emergency and alcohol is banned from restaurants. The CEO of Suntory, one of Japan's biggest beverage makers, says the economic loss from no spectators will be enormous.
I'd expected that a lot of spectators from abroad to visit restaurants and bars where they sell products and promote their brands. We had a plan to open more than a couple of bars and restaurants only for our products sponsored by us, but we canceled it.
Do you think that these games could still boost international businesses for Japanese companies?
More and more, I don't think so. I think the Olympics have been losing its value.
Do you think the games should have been postponed?
Considering the current rollout of vaccines in this country, 2 months from now should be the ideal timing.
According to Robert Mayes, a sports marketing executive in Japan, several local sponsors were pushing for the Olympics to be delayed.
The sponsors are paying a lot of money, but basically the return is extremely limited. You got the 5 rings, and then you had what used to be attached as positive with the Olympics, which is the spirit of sport, the pleasure, the youth, the sparkling ideas of sport. But that is all gone now.
Things are going from bad to worse in New South Wales, which has hit a new high for daily COVID cases. 124 have been detected over the past day, and particularly worrying for officials is at least 48 were infectious for a time in the community. There's a growing feeling of despondency in Sydney, with speculation the lockdown will roll on for at least another month. The ABC's Gavin Coote has this report.
We have the most phenomenal school holiday classes ready for your children. Get them off the iPads and into the kitchen.
For years, Basha Krayam has been working to get southwest Sydney-siders excited, but now it's a feeling of despondency and frustration.
The harsher restrictions here has definitely played a very negative role in the mindset of a lot of the community here in Western Sydney, so it's definitely been a tough time for everyone.
The Sydney lockdown has put a stop to Basha Krayam's cooking school for now, and his restaurants at Punchbowl and Bankstown are only doing takeaway.
Business has dropped significantly, but our goal is to keep trading, and we hire approximately 120 part-time and full-time staff members. But yeah, it's been a tough time.
And it's feared the tough times could roll on for at least another month, with up to 60 of yesterday's new cases being out in the community during their infectious period.
It basically means we're not out of here yet, and it also indicates 3 or 4 days ago, people were not staying at home and staying away from others.
Modelling by the University of Melbourne this week has found Sydney's lockdown will need to go until September to suppress the spread of Delta. And on Mary Louise McClaws's analysis, it's unlikely to end much sooner.
So I would have thought that we would have seen early August we were heading in the right direction, and that we just need a couple of weeks of some restrictions. But given we've had this uptick, I'm concerned that this may extend it to the end of August.
That prediction doesn't bode well for many young people in some of Sydney's most disadvantaged areas. Kieran Palmer is the Clinical Services Manager with the Ted Knopfs Foundation, which works with young people who have drug, alcohol and complex mental health issues.
We find that our clients are really quick to absorb
a lot of that sort of global tension or at least that community tension. I mean, it's difficult for so-called well-adjusted people. Another real issue that we have is, we're basically told, look, stay at home. But for a lot of our young people, home isn't a great place. And for a lot of them, it's not a safe place either.
The English city of Liverpool has become the third place to ever lose its World Heritage status. UNESCO says new developments on the city's historic waterfront have destroyed Liverpool's outstanding universal value. The BBC's Claire Hamilton has this report.
Since the vote is positive, the site of Liverpool is deleted from the World Heritage List.
That was the moment Liverpool was stripped of its World Heritage status, an accolade the city's held since 2004. It becomes only the third place in history to ever lose its status. And the problem? Well, it lies here on Liverpool's waterfront. Today, the sun is shining, temperatures are soaring, and it's very busy in front of Liverpool's famous Three Graces. There's a band playing, there are tourists arriving on cruise ships from across the UK. But UNESCO says too many developments, including plans for a new stadium for Everton Football Club, have resulted in a serious deterioration of the site.
We feel very upset by UNESCO not wanting to engage in an open dialogue with us. This could have been a really good opportunity for us to say, come to the city, let's talk about what heritage will look like, not now, in 2035, in 2040, what heritage looks like in the future, but just by closing the door with it, it's not the collaboration that we wanted.
Losing World Heritage status means Liverpool no longer sits in the same company as the Taj Mahal, Egypt's pyramids or Canterbury Cathedral. Sarah Doyle, Liverpool City Council's Cabinet Member for Development and the Economy, isn't happy.
I think really we will still expect people to come to Liverpool to learn about heritage, and for us that's one of the best things, that regardless of whether we have the badge of World Heritage status, we know people will still come to Liverpool, will still walk around and will appreciate the great buildings, the mercantile history that we have here.
Liverpool's Mayor Joanne Anderson says the decision is incomprehensible because Bramley Moor Dock, the site that will become Everton's new home, currently lies derelict.
That's almost up. That's almost us. Rather. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o pōpō. What's coming up on First Up from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning? Well, a health expert in Melbourne on what the future of the Trans-Tasman bubble should be. Kia pai tōpō. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow. Friday!
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Cabinet ministers have held a special virtual meeting on the Trans-Tasman travel bubble, although any announcement is unlikely before tomorrow. The lawyer for Eli Epiha says his only intention was to flee the police when he killed Matthew Hunt and shot another officer in the leg. The Christchurch mayor says the council has made the right decision to reduce the capacity of its new stadium in a bid to stop ballooning costs. The stranded orca calf being cared for in Porirua is being moved out of a temporary pool and into its sea pen for health reasons. Those are the latest news headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Our Changing World, Katie Gossett watches the testing of a new base isolation system to protect homes during earthquakes, while I learn about a blue sky research project into bacterial evolution. Follow Our Changing World on Apple Podcasts, Spotify or iHeart, or listen Thursdays on nights, just after the 9 o'clock news, right here on RNZ National.
Thanks, Claire. That's right. It's on nights later on this evening after the news at 9. I'm Brian Crump, by the way, getting ready for another night on RNZ National, which commences officially after the news at 7. My first guest, Jan Eldridge. She is going to be talking about the scientific realities that may exist behind the sci-fi fantasy of a Star Trek episode from the original Star Trek series, Turnabout Intruder, in which Captain Kirk and Dr. Janice Lester have their minds and bodies swapped. Now, this is more than just it's an exploration we'll have of the nature of what is a mind, what is consciousness, and could you simply swap a body and a mind? And also gender, male and female, all that stuff. Lots to look forward to after the news at 7. In this half hour, later on, a little bit of audio from Saturday morning, actually, with Kim Hill, in which we will discuss, or Kim will discuss with Dr. Tara Shivani, the environmental cost of cryptocurrencies. First off, The Detail. And many Kiwis overseas are paying thousands of dollars for clever computer operators to get them a space in MIQ, because booking a spot is proving impossible for ordinary travellers. The Detail investigates.
Kia ora, I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Today on The Detail, the MIQ nightmare.
Successfully booking one of the rooms is